Joy Drive.
Theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive with Em and Warren.
Good afternoon, Suzy Wrong.
Good afternoon, Warren. You said we received a message about a request
Yes,
for us to cover a certain show?
Yes, we did. We got a request saying, hi, Suzy and Warren, a show recommended to review is My Massive C on Stan. It's a UK documentary interviewing men and the problems they have with such appendages. That's from Neil.
Yeah. So we haven't got that prepared yet. I'll check that out and we'll see if that's appropriate.
Okay.
But we are talking about masculinity today, aren't we?
We are definitely, because we're talking about Commander Fort, which is streaming on Disney+. Do you want to tell us about it, Suzy?
Ricardo Fort was an Argentinian celebrity who died 10 years ago at the young age of 45. He had enjoyed just 4 years of fame, but remains iconic for his extravagant ways as a multimillionaire and for his extraordinary looks from prolonged steroid usage and an addiction to surgical procedures. In the first part of Commander Fort, the new docuseries streaming on Disney+, we see a version of the star close to the way he had wanted to be known, a glitzy, vibrant, strong character who has everything one could possibly want. In subsequent episodes, we go deeper into spaces he never had opportunities to talk about, where we explore his background and his psyche. The more we get to know the real Ricardo Fort, the more intriguing he becomes. Ricardo was a gay man with a history of falling victim to sexual abuse. It is tempting to explain everything through that lens, but we get a feeling that Ricardo is probably a lot more complex than however we wish to pin him down. His insatiable need to be admired, that never-ending search for acceptance. I wonder if it's a common trait amongst queer people who invariably grow up experiencing rejection and persecution. We look at Ricardo and think, surely you have had enough of adoration, of wealth, of physical perfection. But he often looks as though nothing was going to satisfy him. So even though we can see that Ricardo had lived a full life, he had been through every high and every low, his story is in some ways a tragic one of a person who never really found peace and happiness. Warren, where do you think we should begin to discuss this series?
Oh, Suzy, I was just thinking, I don't know where to begin with this series, because I started watching it and it's, there's 4 episodes and they're, about an hour each, so it's quite lengthy if you want to watch it in one hit. But I've got to admit, Suzy, I don't know where to start. I had a roller coaster of thoughts and emotions throughout the whole series. I mean, just to look at the series itself and how it presents, I mean, I found the subtitles a little bit difficult because it's such a visual, he's such a visual man, isn't he? It's all about what you see and the impression on stage, the performance and everything. And I wanted to watch that, but I found myself flicking down to the subtitles and then pausing it to flick up and seeing, okay, what's he wearing now? What's he doing? I found that a little bit of a struggle just in terms of the comfort and watching it. But something that, Suzy, struck me is I've seen photos of Ricardo on magazines, and I know you sent a couple through. I had no idea at all that he inherited so much money from his family chocolate business, which is still one of the biggest chocolate businesses in Argentina. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's, I guess, what makes him so intriguing. And I think that's what made him so popular. He was such an unusual combination of things. The way he presented himself didn't look anything like what we imagined or what we are used to millionaires being. Like, I had seen him on covers of Australian gay magazines back, I think, in the late 90s. When magazines was still a very big thing, and he was just extraordinarily striking. Whether he was attractive or not, I think it's a matter of personal taste, really. But he was extraordinarily striking. Anywhere that he would walk into, your eyes would definitely go to him. I think what you were saying earlier about struggling with the subtitles was like he has just mesmerizing face, body, and the whole presence of him.
It's intriguing.
Yeah. And I guess in some people will say that he's a bit freaky looking, as people are very used to saying that people with too much plastic surgery on their face are freaky looking. I think it goes past that a bit. It transcends that a little bit, because you do get used to it, and then you just start just becoming really mesmerized by this person.
You do get used to it, but then you see, there's some clips of him when he's a lot younger, and, the difference is really obvious from having the work to what he was. And he was beautiful when he was young, let's face it. But, the sad thing is, Suzy, that struck me with it is, this masculinity, the power of it. He had this insatiable thirst to be so popular and famous, and he threw all his money out of it. But that power, of this masculinity, it just causes us to suppress ourselves. And that's what he was doing, wasn't he? I had no idea that, I was reading up on him, that he was a bit of a gay activist at the time. I didn't know that. And that didn't necessarily come across in the series as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the series felt like it was made for people who were familiar with him. So I think for you and I, who don't know very much about him, sometimes it felt like things were a bit vague. So I don't really know if they are trying to sort of hide some things, or it's just too common knowledge in Argentina for them to cover again. But for us, we kind of hear little bits that come through and go, oh, that makes the picture so much more interesting, so much bigger an image you can have in your imagination of who this person was, because he wasn't sort of he looks not really like what you'd imagine a gay man to be, I don't think, and he kind of didn't sort of walk around with a man in his arms a lot. So in some ways he looked like maybe he was a bit in the closet, and then you hear interviews about him talking really openly about being gay. So there are those quite interesting things that happen through the 4 episodes that make you find that know him sort of incrementally.
We are talking about Commander Fort, which is streaming on Disney Plus at the moment with Suzy Wrong at the moment. Now, Suzy, something that that made me a little sad as well is the obsession with our physical bodies. And I mean, Ricardo went to the extreme of having chin implants, all sorts of surgery, implants everywhere, basically, in order to create this image of this big, muscly, masculine man. And he was so addicted to this image, and he thought that people would only love him so much for his body, that even when he was dying, he was going to the gym and pushing himself. And, we don't know whether that contributed to an early death or not, but I just thought, wow, this is so sad. And then after that, we finally see a humble him that's realised, you know what, I've basically made a mistake. I've done all this stuff and it hasn't given me the love that I wanted, and it's taken me away from my family. I thought that was really sad, and, something that maybe we could all learn from.
That's really powerful. That moment where he was pushing against the pain, people like him, I guess they're so used to pushing against the pain, but he knew he had really serious physical problems, and yet he couldn't give that part of him up. He still had to go into all the activities that caused him all this sickness. And that was really hard to watch. But it's also very revealing, isn't it? In sort of showing you what humans can be like. And it kind of makes you think, like I said earlier, when is enough enough? Like, is it a problem that a lot of people have, especially gay people, trans people? When is enough enough?
Yeah, when do we stop?
Yeah.
And just say we're okay as we are.
And it's easy for us to look at him because, he's attained an appearance that you can't look any sort of more like the ideal that he's going for. And you can't have more than 3 Rolls Royces. It's pointless. But why does he not stop? And then you think, right, I might not have the 3 Rolls Royces. I might not have had all these surgeries and stuff. But am I on that same trajectory? Am I always pursuing something that is pointless and that just kind of doesn't give you anything, doesn't give you real happiness and peace.
Definitely. So we are talking about Commander Fort on Disney Plus, which is about Ricardo Fort, the life of Ricardo Fort. I was surprised at the reaction of the Argentinian public. I mean, it was a bit like Evita, wasn't it? I mean, just absolutely worshipped everywhere he went. And then I was thinking, he could sing. I mean, there's a part in the show where he sings, and I thought, wow, he's actually got a really good voice.
And he plays the piano?
And he plays the piano, and he's got all this talent, but all this money is thrown into manufacturing this masculine image instead of necessarily harnessing those things. I know he did try and get a few record labels and all that sort of thing, but the Argentinian public just went crazy for him. They were going absolutely nuts.
I think ultimately it is an underdog story, because I think the first impression is like, oh, this strange looking person. And I think when you hear him talk or just kind of observe the way he lives his life, he just does things in such an unusual way. And you kind of root for him. You want the best for him. And also they did explain in the show, I think one of his children explained that he was a rich person, but his money came from legitimate ways. Like, they're used to, apparently, in Argentina, a lot of bribery and people getting rich through politics and things like that. Yeah. So he was sort of also considered, someone who was legitimately wealthy and someone to look up to. And they would want to have that kind of wealth. And he made it sort of visible for them because he was so ostentatious.
It was interesting because we do get a glimpse of, I think in episode 3, the kids. He's got 2 kids, a son and a daughter. And I found it interesting. I felt like we sort of, they get presented, but we don't really hear much about them, do we? I know that the daughter said, look, it wasn't normal to grow up in a household with so many people constantly coming over, and she said, we saw things as kids that we should never have seen. But other than that, you don't really sort of find out what's going on so much in their world, more how they are going to perpetuate him and his image after he's gone.
Yeah, I think that the show tried to show them in as positive a light as possible, but they are teenagers. They're nowhere near fully formed person, so it's a big question mark. I watch it and I think, oh, I hope it works out well for you, because it's pretty messy.
Me too. I was a bit worried about them. But I have to admit, Suzy, if I inherited a chocolate factory, I tell you what, I'd be keeping the chocolate factory. I'd probably be eating a bit too.
Look, I love him after watching the whole thing, but I do think that he could have done a lot with that money.
Yeah, definitely.
And it looked like he didn't. So I wouldn't say that I would admire him the way his fans do, but it is he is an intriguing person, and the documentary allowed me to sort of have reflections about the way I live my life, the way I think about my appearance, the way I think about my femininity and things like that. So I think it is well done and is well worth a look.
I agree too. I had the same reaction. I started questioning, why am I so obsessed with going to the gym? And I just thought, I'm no Commander Fort, but I certainly have that addiction to not letting myself, I want to look after myself. And I started questioning and saying, well, maybe I can loosen the strings a little bit. Maybe it doesn't need to be that tight. Yeah,
I think that's the biggest point that the thing is trying to make. Like, he's so hardcore, and where does he get him?
Exactly. It doesn't change anything. But the insecurity is still there. It is called Commander Fort on Disney Plus. Now, Suzy, I won't be here next week. Em will be. What will you be watching?
From 15th February, the annual Mardi Gras Film Festival begins again. Part of the program is streamable anywhere in Australia, including my choice for next week's discussion, a film from India called A Place of Our Own. Go to queerscreen.org.au for more info. That's the Mardi Gras Film Festival at queerscreen.org.au, and I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, Suzy. Catch you then.
Thank you.
You're tuned in to Joy Drive on Joy 94.9.